Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Casey Turner Presents Talk to Me. My guest today is the one and only Steve Poltz, reporting all the way from Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please comment below. Let me and Steve know where you're tuning in from. If you've seen Steve Poltz live before, comment. Let us know where you've seen him. Tell us your first encounter with the man. And if you've never seen him live before, you're in for a big treat, and I hope that you become a fan of his by the end of this talk here. But thank you again so much for being here, and thanks for sharing this. Start watch parties, whatever that means, and help us get as many people watching this as possible. And down below also, you'll see a link to Steve's merchandise. He's got so much merch and a new record for sale. You can go check that out. And also, there's a couple links there if you want to throw a couple tips in to help support this live stream podcast thing that I'm doing in the meantime here. It's greatly appreciated. But without further ado, welcome Steve Poltz to talk to me. How you doing, buddy?
Good, my friend.
It's so good to see you. And I've been watching a handful of your live streams over the last few weeks. I think from that same spot you're sitting in, because I recognize the Dan Byrne artwork behind you that says Mother Folk and Folker.
He's great. I love Dan. He sends me paintings, and I watch him play a lot online. I haven't played in a while online. You
Well,
know?
I'm glad that you've taken a break and you've saved all the energy for this amazing interview that's about to go down.
Yeah.
So I guess I've known you and your music now almost to the date 10 years is the first time I saw you play. I was in Austin, Texas for South by Southwest, hanging out with my friend Matt the electrician, our friend Matt the electrician, and we're running around Austin that week, and he's showing me all around and introducing me to all these great musician friends of his. And he goes, "Have you ever seen Steve Poltz play?" And I go, "I've heard the name, but I don't know anything about him." He goes, "Oh man, we're gonna go see him play." And so we went and saw the band you had there play. And at the time, you had a broken wrist, I recall. And I'm pretty sure it was Sean Rolfe that was strumming for you. It may not have been Sean. I picture Sean in my head, but I didn't know him then. But someone playing guitar for you, and you're equally as energized with a broken limb in that outdoor hot Texas show. And I was a fan instantly. I bought the T-shirt, which I still sport today. This is the T-shirt I bought 10 years ago from that day, and I became a fan ever since. And since then, you and I have done so many fun things together. Even later that year in 2010, we did a house concert in San Rafael with Smile Smile opened the show, and that was my first time really getting a chance to talk to you. And I remember you pulled up in your Mercedes Sprinter, and I thought you were too cool for school for a second. And I was like, uh-oh, this guy's not going to like me. But then you ended up being pretty cool, and I love you, and you're one of my favorite humans I've ever met on Earth. So that was a long little intro, but I'm so happy you're here, and it's good to know you.
I remember that show when I met you. I think it was like at a Mexican restaurant in
Yeah.
Austin. And I can't believe it was only 10 years ago. It feels like I've known you for 20 years because we've done so much. So in promoter slash artist years, it's been 30 years, if you ask me. Like it's a lot longer. 10 years doesn't seem that long.
Mm-mm. It doesn't. And it's kind of funny to think about your career in a nutshell in the last 10 years. I mean, you've got a very long going career that we'll talk about in this chat here, but I feel like the last 10 years have been probably the most productive 10 years in your touring, and how many people know of you now, and how many people come to see you perform. Would you agree with that?
Most definitely. And I was poised to have the biggest summer yet before this pandemic hit. And I think we had like 28 festivals booked. So I was never going to be home. And the funny thing is I was on two different cruise ships at the beginning of this year, which sounds like just saying that would make a room stop and turn and go, what? And I hugged everyone on the cruise ship and played shows. I was Jam Cruise, and then I did Kayamo on Norwegian Pearl, and they were both sold out cruises. And then I did the Belly Up Birthday Bash where I meet everybody, and then a show the next night that was sold out at Music Box in San Diego. And like when I'm done, I always have stood there and you take pictures, you sign stuff, you hug people, and everybody's in a great mood. The show's over, and it's sort of a celebratory feeling. And it's so strange to think of that now as what was I thinking? Like, how did I not get coronavirus? Like, how did I avoid it? Because there was people from all over, and on the people that work on the cruise ship too, or from all different countries. And I, I know I haven't had it because I would know if I'd had it.
Right. You told me that in an earlier conversation when this kind of all went down, you were one of the first people I talked to because I knew that you you work harder than almost anyone I know on the road, and I just thought of you right away of how many shows you were probably losing in the every second. But you were like, I can't get it because I've got pre-existing conditions. It would get me. You were like kind of extra careful.
I really think it would kill me, and I hate saying that, but I've had 13 collapsed lungs. My lungs are my one Achilles, it's my Achilles heel are my lungs. And so if I get a cold, like I haven't had a cold in 2 years, but when I do, it always turns into bronchitis, and I can't get rid of it. So I just don't want to get coronavirus.
Well, and also, I mean, I think and you and I have a pretty dark sense of humor, and which I should actually let all the parents out there know before we get too deep into this talk. There is a parental advisory on this. I don't even know what's going to happen, but I'm just going to assume that you don't want your kids in the room probably for this particular episode of Talk to Me. But I feel like it'd be kind of funny if you did get coronavirus. It wouldn't be funny actually, but it would be kind of funny. And then the last thing you say on your bed, just to full circle the Steve Poltz story and stay consistent to how you are, it would be BOP. And for those of you that don't know what BOP is, I'm sorry. There's going to be a lot of you got to be kind of a fan for some of these inside jokes, but
Well, BOP means bag of porn. It's a song I have called Long Haul. I, you know, it's just been so strange because the mood swings, I can only speak for me personally, that I've been through since this lockdown started. It's been really intense to be just in one city when I'm used to being on a flight or in a car or on a train or going to sound check and being in a different city. And now to be home and, reading books and doing yoga and going on walks and every day checking the news and trying not to read too much news and trying to stay positive. But man, we'd had a tornado here in Nashville, that destroyed everything 3 blocks from where I live. Then the pandemic hit, and then just 4 nights ago we had this thing called a derecho, which is 80-mile-an-hour wind straight through, and 130,000 people lost power, of which I was one of them. And we were without power for 4 days, and we just got it back. So everything in the refrigerator went bad, and like every time you go to the store, you feel like you're taking your life into your own hands. That's my one big thing I do. And I'm good friends with this guy Jesse, who's in the band of Heathens, and he lives with my friend Nikki Bloom. And I see these people on walks, and Chris Wood from Wood Brothers, and from Medeski Martin and Wood. And there's many times like I see these people every day, and I want to hug them because in Nashville, it's just all these musicians, and I'm like a golden retriever, and I just want to jump in their arms. You know how I am. I when I see friends, I want to hug them and I want to get really close to them and tell them something I'm excited about. So it's been sort of a learning curve for me I can't do that. And Sharon is always trying to tell me, dude, just, you got to mellow out. When I just go into Whole Foods, I want to talk to somebody. So
well, and I think that over the course of your career, you're not really you're a rule breaker. Is that fair to say? You like when someone sets up a rule up, it's like, oh, cool, thanks for letting me know what I need to break, which I think is a good way to segue into kind of the start of your journey into music. When you were a kid, were you this way? Were you a rule breaker? Did you piss your parents off a lot? Talk about a little bit growing up and and how you kind of became who you are, but also your introduction to music and maybe some of the first albums you heard that got you kind of steering into were you always a performer as a kid? Were you always kind of the ham of the dinner party?
I was very hyperactive, and so that just took me where it was going to take me. And I was glued to the radio, and I loved sports, and I would memorize the win-loss records of the Dodgers and the Cincinnati Reds. The Cincinnati Reds, I hated them. They were just always so good, and they were called the Big Red Machine. And there weren't as many leagues back then. You know, you didn't have three. And so I was obsessed with baseball and music. And there were rules because I was raised in a very strict Catholic family. And I didn't purposely break them. It's just they didn't seem necessary to me. Rules. No has never meant no to me. It's always meant, oh, I just haven't figured out a way to get around this loophole. And I always felt rules were for other people, like including the speed limit or anything. And with that, you have a learning curve that sometimes you get busted, sometimes you don't. But I loved being in choir and being in the church choir. So where I learned about music was in mass, the Catholic mass, and singing the songs and being an altar boy, and the Flying Nun, and My Three Sons, and all these shows, and old comedians, and Henny Youngman and Bob Hope. And then as I got older, I mean, we would watch the Steve Allen show. My parents would stay up and watch that, and then that became Johnny Carson. And I loved when they would have a comedian on, and I was just always really curious and wanted to travel. So I think it sort of set the tone for where I was going. I think if you're curious and you love music, it's a good combination for maybe you'll have a future in this business.
So at what age did you discover your first musical instrument, assuming it's a guitar? Was it was it something kind of accidentally happened? Was it something you sought out? You saw someone play and you were like, I want to be like that.
Yeah, my uncle Louis, who I wish you could have known, he was my mom's brother from my mom's side, and my mom and her sister Sylvia and Uncle Louis and Uncle Joey, four of them, they're all dead now, but they were all kind of, my mom and Uncle Louis were really musical, and Louis uh, was a gay man who was a piano player and a genius. And so he would take me to the Hollywood Bowl, and that's where I first saw Julian Bream play classical guitar, and that's when I had that aha moment where I said, I want to play classical guitar. And so they got me lessons, and that was where it all started. And Uncle Louis had a lot to do with that. And then he'd have me sing, and I would sing in recitals at the age of 6, and I would dress up and sing these wonderful songs, like from Fiddler on the Roof and from Oliver and from Godspell and Jesus Christ Superstar. And so he took me to see Jesus Christ Superstar and to see Godspell, the Greek Theater at the Hollywood Bowl. We lived in Pasadena, California, and so we had moved there from Canada. And I was just raised with this sense of the arts, and my mom taught the choir, the church choir at the Catholic school. She was what you'd call a lay teacher, but I had nuns that were my regular teachers. And I was always in choir, so I was in concert choir. I was in the top vocal group called the Madrigals, and we would tour and compete against other schools. And I was also on the wrestling team and in the hiking club, and I ran cross country, and I was seventh grade president, and I stuttered, had eczema and asthma, and took Spanish. I was really like involved in everything. I had 3 paper routes. So I was one of those kids that had boundless energy.
Wow. So, how old were you when your Uncle Louis got you a guitar or introduced you to getting lessons? And
And the guitar teacher came over. I was 6 years old, and I started learning to read music. And I wanted to rock, but we had to play Down in the Valley and all these songs that were really boring. But I loved it when the guitar teacher came over, and I was so excited. And I really took to it. Like, it was something that it would take me a minute to get into practicing, but then once I did, I didn't know where the time went. And you'd always know if you were having a good session if drool dropped out of your mouth while you were practicing. A long string of drool would hit down and land on your leg, and that's when I knew I was just lost in a measure. And I really learned how to practice, and how to practice slowly, and how to go over a measure of a song at a time, and really woodshed on that. And I think that's a skill that you have to learn, is kind of, practice is a skill that you just got to learn. And having being in this, to shoot ahead real quick, to be in this pandemic, I'm going back to those days and learning songs and stuff that is out of my wheelhouse, and that's been fun. But yeah, so the guitar teacher would come over, and then I would just practice guitar and play for hours. And that was when I realized I didn't need any friends. All I needed was a guitar, and I would make up games and play alone. Like, I was really happy just being alone. I made up so many games. This is long before we ever had video games or anything. And I had these games, this baseball game I made up, and I would keep the averages. I'd write it all down. I had the teams. I was the manager of the Dodgers. I was a huge Dodgers fan, because that was my dad's team. And that was what I lived for, that and music.
So, I mean, age 6 is really a young age to get started with it. It's probably one of the younger ages out of the folks I've talked to when I ask those questions. But just to back up a little bit, just to keep it all kind of in line. So, you moved from Canada to Pasadena before that. What brought your family to the desert, and what's the story behind you going from Canada to that area?
Well, my dad was in the RCAF, which is the Royal Canadian Air Force, and so I was born in Halifax in the infirmary to the Sisters of Charity. And so my dad met my mom. My dad was from Winnipeg, and my mom was from Cape Breton. And then they lived in Halifax, and that's where I was born. And my dad was just sick of the snow, and I think my mom wanted to move. My mom was married once before my dad, and it only lasted 6 months, and her husband was killed in a plane crash. And so she was just shattered. And my mom had suffered from depression, and she was a bit bipolar. And so I think she wanted to get out because she just had bad memories, and she didn't want my dad in the Air Force because she had lost her first husband who was in the Air Force. So she and my dad decided we were going to move to Southern California. And so we moved to Pasadena, California. And that was where my dad, he had to go to night classes, and he had no money. I mean, they moved us across the country with 2 kids and probably only $500, and they lived in some friend's couch in the living room. And my dad went to night school and got a job in air conditioning, and then we were in Pasadena, and then he got a job offer in Palm Springs, so we moved out to the desert.
Um, so before we kind of conclude this segment, I mean, I would love to get a song out of you here in a moment, but uh, for those of you listening that are Steve Poltz fans, have seen him on numerous occasions. You can kind of hear some of the songs that he sings. I feel I can hear some of your songs about your biographical songs. And the T-shirt of the little trailer or car pulling the trailer going cross country, and it's kind of cool to hear a little bit more of an in-depth picture of that doesn't just rhyme. But I do have one question, and a magician doesn't have to give away his tricks. So, but you have a lot of really great stories you share over the years, and this kind of ties into the Palm Springs story about meeting Elvis. And I have to ask, and I've never actually asked you this, and I've always just wanted to assume, but is that true? Did you really meet Elvis, or was that just a good story to share?
No, it's definitely true. It's kind of funny because the guy that lived across the street from us was the manager of the airport. His name was Mr. Rice. And so he would always tell us when, like, Bob Hope came in, or Uncle Charlie from My Three Sons. Frank Sinatra. I met Frank Sinatra. But I was a huge Elvis fan. Frank was really mean to me. He was like, kind of like, didn't want to do, he scared me. Like, he was kind of strict. But Bob Hope was really nice. But Elvis was my hero. I was a kid, and it was the 60s, and we lived for Elvis Presley movies. And so, yeah, the guy that ran the airport told us, that he was landing, and I've never forgotten that, and it was really powerful to meet him. The thing I took away from it was how generous he was with his time. I mean, it was almost like he needed that. He needed that praise. He was so happy that my sister and I rode our bikes on the tarmac. And I mean, this is obviously pre 9/11, I'm talking 1969. And he was so full of joy to see us, and picked me up. And he was just cool. Like it blew my mind, and I don't even think I could sleep that night. So yeah, it's definitely true.
You have a really great essay on that you've read at shows, and obviously it's in your songs. And yeah, I was almost afraid to ask. I'm always afraid to ask like some of those questions because I'm like, if you were like, if we were having soul food up in San Rafael one night late, and you were like, "Hey, I made all that shit up. It ain't true," I'd be like, "Oh man," it's kind of like when you find out Santa's not real, or that's why I said, anyways.
Speaking of
uh,
Santa being real, I have this thing that I do a lot when I play, and it happens in every show at one point, and I'll say, "This is the greatest show I've ever played." And this little kid came to see me in Australia, and he saw that show. And man, he was so thrilled. And his dad told me his son came home. We just saw the greatest show Steve Poltz ever played because he told us that. If Steve Poltz said it, I mean, you're a kid. You see this guy. He's like, we just saw the greatest show he ever played. And then they saw me a month later at the end of my Australia tour. And 10 minutes through the show, I said, this is the greatest show I've ever played. And the dad told me the kid was just like really bummed. Because he was like, but I thought we already saw the greatest show he ever played. So I had to explain to the kid that, because it was like finding out Santa Claus isn't real or something. I had to say, no, every show's the greatest show I've ever played. And I have to say it because it makes me believe it. And if I believe it, it makes the show better. So it's a mental game I play. And I go, and you can do this with anything in life. I told this little kid this. I go, whatever you're doing, say, this is the greatest day I'll ever have. And it can become that. So you manifest it. So I've always used that. And I learned that from my dad. It was like my dad's always been into the power of positive thinking and about visualizing. My dad always said to me, like I wrestled in high school. I was really a pretty good wrestler, and I was really into it. I was a 98 pounder, and my dad would say, you have to visualize what it feels at the end of the match when you've won and the ref grabs your arm and lifts it up. How you feel when you're stronger, you took that guy down and you were able to, you're in the best shape of your life. How does that feel? And so I used to apply that, what my dad taught me, I still do to gigs. And so a lot of times if I'm at a festival, 5 minutes before I go on, I'll say a prayer, and I'll say this prayer that I don't pray to be good, but just that I can make people forget if they're having a bad day or anything, if they're having a hard time in life. I want to be a good diversion for them. So I always picture the audience on their feet at the end of the show, arm in arm. And I visualize what it feels like for that to already have happened. And if I do that, I manifest my own reality. And usually, more often than not, that ends up becoming true. It's amazing. It's a weird trick.
Can we all visualize COVID-19 going away and us going back to a concert so you can do that again?
We can. We have to throw it out there because it's really easy for me every once in a while to get down about this. I mean, I try so hard. I feel like I'm Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction where he goes, I'm trying real hard, Ringo. I'm trying hard not to pop a cap in your ass. When he says, like, normally it'd be your ass, but just get me my wallet back. Like, I'm trying really hard to not go dark because you're talking to somebody who is used to human connection. And so, yeah, we have to visualize what it feels like to get back out there. And I think it's going to be a while until, we're going to be normal again. And kind of like after 9/11, it took a long time where we had changes and we had tighter security. And this is something different because this is an ongoing thing. And so we have to reach out to people and give them a call. And so when I go on my walks, I'll call people. Like yesterday, I had a 2.5 hour conversation with John Castro, who is the bass player in the Rugburns. And we can talk about everything, like why he's vegetarian but not vegan, why his wife's vegan, why I'm not vegan or vegetarian. Should we get a gun? Like, because I think he has a gun, and like things. A lot of times your mind will go to dark places in this, and you just think, man, what if we're going to end up like in fighting factions, and it's going to be um, the decline of Western civilization, and it's going to be chaos. You never know. Like lately, I've never had a gun, but lately I've been having these weird, entertaining these thoughts that maybe I should go to a shooting range and learn to shoot a gun because I need protection. Because I don't know if this is going to be a societal breakdown. And then I go, dude, you know, you've gotten this long in your life. I'm 60 without ever shooting a gun. I don't need one, but I will be honest with you. In my mind, sometimes I think these thoughts, and I have to tell you that these are thoughts I think because they're real, and I'm not even being facetious in saying that.
Oh, I hope you don't get a gun. But I do hope you play us a song. Can you give us one?
Yeah, I don't have a plan to get a gun, but every once in a while I think, man, is shit hitting the fan? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and maybe is that too much Tennessee talking? You know,
You know, I don't know, because
In San Francisco, I don't feel like we need a gun. You know, I feel pretty chill here.
I know I'm definitely in a red state. I'm a blue guy in a red state. But every once in a while, I just have been thinking lately, what's gonna happen? Like, do I need protection? Should I sleep with a baseball bat by my bed? Like the other night, 4 nights ago, this guy right across the street walked into my neighbor's house while they were asleep and stood over the bed and touched this guy's wife on the shoulder, and this guy wasn't wearing a shirt. And his wife woke up and threw a table at him, and the police arrested the guy. And it's like, it was kind of like, I was just thinking, man, shit's getting weird right now. Like, and I'm hearing helicopters fly over all the time. And, you know, we still have this destruction from the tornado, and it looks like a war zone in different areas. And I don't know, it's just testing my resolve on the goodness of the world and where we're headed. But I think we will get out of it because I am staying positive, but you asked me, right?
100%.
Where's the heat when you need it? It's colder than it should be. I remove the AC from my window. I wanna sweat you out of me. I was floating down my own path like a drunken butterfly. Put me back in my cocoon. I wanna sleep it off tonight. Why not? Is what I thought. I can always move again. Stardust and satellites, we're all made of moving parts and broken hearts, and we're all just floating. Where's a friend I'm older than I should be. Maybe I should have stayed in California. It's pretty much its own country. I was dreaming down my own path, like a ragged raconteur. Put me back in my old cell, where I know I'll get the cure. Why not is what I thought. I can always move again. Stardust and satellites, we're all made of moving parts and broken hearts, and we're all just floating. Take a page from a new book, a shot of something pure. Take a picture of a memory. Chances are it's blurred.
Oh, that's a lovely song. Here,
This
remember it? Do
recently
you
was
remember?
my Anthony DaCosta. We wrote that together.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I'll give you some applause. You haven't heard that probably in a while. So, actually, that was really wonderful. Thanks for sharing that song. If you are just joining us, welcome to Casey Turner Presents Talk to Me. This is Steve Poltz, our guest this evening. He's in Nashville, Tennessee. Let us know below where you're watching from, and if you've got a good Poltz story to share, type it below. We'll take a look at it later. Also, please share this. Help us get as many people watching as possible, and hopefully get Steve Poltz some new fans, because I think everyone that becomes a Steve Poltz fan becomes one for life. I'm pretty sure. Lifer.
Thanks, man. It's crazy. What do you think's going to happen?
With the success of this podcast, or
No, the election coming up. It's like we don't hear as much about that because it's all COVID, 24 hours a day. But I've always been a political animal, and I studied political science at University of San Diego, and I remember I used to bring my professors home for Thanksgiving to Palm Springs to have dinner with my mom and dad, and I would bring one that was a uber right wing guy who was wrote books about Nixon. His name was Dr. Stoddard, and I loved him. And then I'd bring one that was a total socialist, Dr. Otto, who I loved so much. And we would study the Sandinistas and what was going on in Central America and capitalism, if it was a flawed system, inherently flawed, do we need safety nets, all the way to Dr. Stoddard being more of a right-wing guy and less government control, and discussing even Goldwater and all these different schools of thoughts of politics. And Daniel Ortega, what he was doing with the Sandinistas, and Che Guevara, and what is a freedom fighter versus a terrorist. And so I would bring them home, and we would have the greatest discussions, and they would both get drunk on wine and hit on my sister Kathy, and it was hilarious because my sister, was real beautiful, and here's these two older professors getting drunk and both hitting on her, and my mom and dad there, and I would start these really intense discussions of stuff. whether I would just bring up a subject because everything has some sort of politics tied to it. I would bring up, Muhammad Ali and when he changed his name and when he didn't go to Vietnam and how he said he wasn't going to go over there and kill the yellow man. What did he have to do with the yellow man? The way he would describe what he was going through. And I remember growing up in this time where it was really tumultuous and it was the 60s and it seemed like every day somebody was getting assassinated. My earliest memory is of John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy being assassinated, and my mom crying. That's my earliest memory. And then his brother Bobby being killed, and Rosie Greer, the football player, covering over and capturing Sirhan, the assassin, and MLK being killed, Martin Luther King. For people that are watching this, it's really important that we go out and we don't forget our past because it's so easy to forget our past. And that's why one of the things I love about living where I do in Nashville is I can go to Memphis and I can go to the MLK Museum and see right where he was shot and remember the hatred. And this kind of stuff is still going on today, with people getting a short shrift in this country and all over the world. And so it's an interesting time to be alive because we're about to enter an election that it's unprecedented for us, these candidates, to not have gone out and be able to be campaigning. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm every day I'm fascinated. And I love reading. I can't get enough. I'm reading a great book right now called Shantaram, which is such a beautiful novel about this guy in India, and it's an epic. And I love reading music biographies. I love reading the New York Times. I love reading the New Yorker. I love reading Atlantic. I love reading the Wall Street Journal and Washington Post. I subscribe to everything. I have so many, through that Apple app, I can get every magazine, and I love curling up next to a great article and getting lost in that, along with a book I'm reading, and then doing my own writing. I still want to write a book, so I don't know. These are wild times, and being able to learn to bake bread or anything. I mean, we can learn so much. We have everything at our fingertips.
Well, speaking of learning and kind of going back to you bringing the professors home for dinner, I want to transition to you moving to San Diego. Now, did you move to San Diego to originally just for college?
Yeah, I moved to San Diego because my sister moved there, and it was sort of like that movie, Almost Famous, where I think he gets left all the records. My sister left me a lot of her records, and she left me her waterbed, and she had a waterbed with this eagle blanket on top of it. I've never forgotten this, and she left me her waterbed and her car, a Dodge Demon, with on the back was a sticker that said "Give Jesus a Chance," because at the time we were both born again Christians in high school. Like she had told me, you can't be Catholic anymore. You're not saved. You haven't accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll do that then. So I remember she took me to this born again meeting where you get baptized, and and then but she also turned me on to pot. So I smoked a bunch of pot, and I went in there, and that was when I fake spoke in tongues because I had a crush on her friend Darcel. And so I acted like I was born again and could speak in tongues, and I was like, "Ah." She thought it was so cool that I was speaking in tongues. I really couldn't. And anyway, so I had this corner that said, "Give Jesus a chance" on the back, and smoking pot and singing for the Lord. We were learning all these songs. We were learning all these Christian songs. It was kind of funny. It was such a weird time because it was the early 70s.
Early 70s.
And everything was. I remember there was this one guy named Marjo Kortner or something. It was like this Christian singer that we thought was really cool. And then I was really into Jesus Christ Superstar and Godspell and all those songs. And we would go on these retreats. I mean, even as a kid, I would dress up like a priest and give all the neighborhood kids grape juice, and I'd get Wonder Bread and make communion wafers out of it, and I'd pretend I was a priest and serve them all communion. Like, religion has played such a huge part in my life because it was so ingrained in my head. And then, you know, going through moving to San Diego and going to a Catholic university, and I played in the folk mass in college. You know, like I may have been in the Rugburns, but we started in the folk mass at the Sunday night mass. Me and Rob Driscoll, that's what we did, and we were idiots,
Is that
you
where
know.
you guys? Is that where you met Rob Driscoll?
Yeah, in USD, and he was playing classical guitar. But we both played classical guitar, and we learned all these duets together, and we learned Beatles songs. But I hadn't written any songs yet. I thought, I didn't. Some people start writing at a really young age. I played guitar really well, but I had gone away to Up With People like right after I graduated from high school. Like Up With People came to our high school my senior year, and they played there, and I was like, this looks awesome. Like it was I think it came there in 1976, and my sister went away with them. And then I was like, this is a way for me to get out of the house because, you know, I loved my mom a lot, and she died a couple years ago. And it was really sad for me to lose her. But in the same breath of me saying that, it was a hard relationship. I still hurt a lot over her death because I loved her, but she really suffered from depression, and she had to get shock therapy. And one of my earliest memories is of her coming back from the hospital after the shock therapy, and she didn't know who we were. And that was a powerful thing that stood out. And our house was always really dark when I was growing up, when I was a kid, and she cried a lot and was very sad, and it was hard, and nowadays there's so many medicines they can give people, but depression's real. And um, I think I inherited a little bit, some of that darkness, even though I'm light most of the time. I think, that was a lot of the reason I drank so much and did massive amounts of cocaine too, was because if I was doing cocaine and drinking, as long as the coke was there and the booze was there, it was fun. But then I would like come down from it and get really dark. But I wanted to get out of the house because I didn't like living at home, and so Up With People came, and that seemed like the right thing to do. Like most people would be starting punk bands in the late '70s and have like this indie rock cred to tell you, like, I went to New York and was really into the band Television, and we were playing CBGBs. We were in the Ramones. Not me, man. I was into Saturday Night Fever. I loved the Bee Gees. I was into anything the radio would play, like Seals and Crofts. I learned every song, and I went away to Up With People and traveled, and we were the Hispanic cast. Our cast, we were cast. I think we were cast A, and we lived in Argentina and in Mexico. We would play bull rings and stay with families, and so we would sing the song Up With People, and it was hilarious. And I was the guitar player, and it taught me all about. We were on buses, and we would have to go there and set up, tear down, sound check. I would. Everybody got to do PR, and we'd get to go ahead for 2 weeks. I lived in Mexico City for 2 weeks. I remember I lived with these two guys in Argentina, and now looking back on it, of course they were gay. They were two men that were like 40-year-old men, and I just thought they were roommates that slept in the same bed and gave me their extra room. But you would stay with host families, and it was two gay guys, and there was a woman that lived above them that was like, how like a lot of older women like gay guys, like there's like this whole scene, like she's not gay but loves hanging out with the gay guys. And as I look back on it now, it all makes sense. And we would drink mate, which is this really highly caffeinated drink where you all share the straw. And mate is like this Argentine thing where you hand it to somebody else, and it looks like weed, but it gets you super wired. And I remember that the woman was like 44 years old, and I was 18, and they were like, "Hey, she wants you to take her to a hotel and have sex with her." And I was like, "What?" It was like the Graduate, and which was a movie that really affected me. I was like, "Well, what do I do?" And they said, "You have to learn to say, would you like to go with me and have sex in this hourly motel?" And the way they taught me to say this, I've never forgotten this. It was, and they speak Castilian there, which is Spanish, but it's like got the theta, like how you hear in Spain, like they're like gracias. And so they said, "¿Quieres venir conmigo a alojamiento?" Would you like to go with me? And alojamiento is an hourly rate motel where, because in Argentina, a lot of the people there will live at home with their parents, even in their 30s, till they get married. So if they want to go have sex, they would go to like have a tryst at these hourly motels. So I've never forgotten this. I was in Buenos Aires, beautiful city, very European. They have great pizza and just gorgeous. And it was a fall day, and I remember I was walking, and this 44-year-old woman had her arm in mine, and I'm 18, and I was so shaky. I remember I said, ¿Quieres venir conmigo, alojamiento? And my voice kind of cracked, and she was like, Sí. And we go up there, and then there was like a guy behind this glass wall, like bulletproof wall. It's this shitty hotel, and he's like, gives you a rubber and a face top and a towel, a shitty towel, and slides it under the glass and a key to a room. They lead you up to this room. In the room was a round bed with a mirror above it. I've never forgotten this. With this one thing on the music system, and it was only two songs playing. They were both by Gilbert O'Sullivan, and one of them was called "Alone Again Naturally," and the other was "Claire." And "Claire" was a song about a guy who sleeps with his babysitter, Claire. Remember that song? Claire, the moment I met you, I swear. And then "Alone Again Naturally," which is a song about suicide, but a jaunty song about suicide. And it says, "In a little while from now, if I'm not feeling any less sour, I promise myself to treat myself and visit a nearby tower, climbing to the top, throw myself off." It's all about suicide. He goes, but it's a beautiful song. It goes, "Alone again, naturally." And those are the two songs on the thing. And so I remember, so we did the deed, we had sex, and then we're laying there, and I couldn't speak any more Spanish than, "Would you like to go with me to the hotel?" Except a couple of things. And it was like this most awkward thing where we had the room for an hour, and we both had a cigarette. Of course, I can't smoke. I have bad lungs, but I tried. But I've never forgotten that. And so if she was 44 and I was 18, that means now she'd probably be 86. So I wonder if she's still alive. Because I'm 60 now, right? How old would she be? Like, she was 26 years older than me, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
So if I'm 60, she'd be 86. How cool is that? I need to
That's like
look her up,
that's like the greatest love story I've ever heard.
isn't it? Like, what's she doing now? Like, maybe she's still in Argentina and she's telling somebody this story right now too, going, "Wow, I slept with this 18-year-old American Canadian." It could
Maybe
happen.
so. Maybe she's watching this conversation right now, and she's like, "El Polzo."
We can only hope. That'd be the greatest thing ever.
This is a great transition. So you're in college, you're in San Diego, you're uh, doing the religious thing, obviously, kind of maybe not following the path of the light perfectly. Uh, at what point do you guys form the Rug Burns? Because it's such a, I mean, for those of you guys that don't know the band, the Rug Burns, I mean, that is your punk rock band, and you guys were crazy. And I'm guessing that's when you really amplified your alcohol and drug use, and I mean the band got great recognition. I mean, to this day, I'll have someone from a radio station be like, I'll be like, "I have Steve Poltz in town," and he'll be like, "Is that the guy from the Rugburns?" Like, they haven't been a band outside of this birthday bash in years. And so, anyways, I'd like to hear about like just forming the Rugburns and how you came up with the name, and how you guys decided to make your first record and play shows, and how it took off in San Diego.
Well, it started in folk mass, the Catholic folk mass at USD, which was a Catholic university, and Rob and we just always played shows together, and so we would play hoot nights. And I remember we entered a talent show, and we lost to a fraternity. Some fraternity brothers won. We took second place. We did a Beatles medley, and these guys, I shit you not, they dressed up in blackface and did "Shout." You know the song from Animal House? This is like in the '80s, and I was like, what? But back then, it was like 1983 or 82. Like, here's these frat boys dressed up in blackface, and we were like, these guys are dicks. But we weren't like horrified like you would be today. Like, if that happened today, it would be like, today everybody is like no matter what, you could say to somebody anything, and somebody's gonna be offended about something. So, like, what's the worst thing in the world? Probably blackface. I could say like that's up there with like you could ask different people, what's the worst word? Probably you ask certain people, it's going to deviate between the N word or the C word, right? Probably like the worst words in the world when you think of words. And so, what's the worst thing? One of the worst things? Blackface. And these frat boys dressed up in blackface and did shout like they were Otis Day and the Knights and won. But nobody even thought it. Like, people weren't even offended because it was like the early 80s. I'm telling you, it was a different world. So we lost, and that was the Rugburns. We were so mad we lost. But we weren't indignant about them dressing up in blackface. I mean, we were like, those guys are dicks. We were just like pissed that we lost. And so we started the band, and we were always playing, and we got a gig in O'Hungry's in Old Town where they had yard-long beers. And we only got to play there once because I got so drunk I knocked over two yard-long beers, and they tilted in these other ones, and we ended up owing the guy money. We were supposed to get $50, but he said we owed him $76 because he took the 50 out, but we still owed him 76, and so we ran out and never paid him it. It was great, and then we ended up playing at open mic nights, which you've been such a big proponent of, and that was where we like honed our skills, and we started playing and played all over the place. And
Is this when you first started writing songs? Because you were doing covers up to that
yeah,
point.
I used to. I had written a couple songs. I remember prior to meeting Rob, I wrote one called "The Blarney Stone Blues" about a guy that takes some acid or something and shrinks down. It was like Honey, I Shrunk the Kid, and ends up with these leprechauns getting really drunk. I don't even really know how the song goes anymore, but I think it went, a leprechaun came up one day, says, Stevie boy, look here, you're much too tall, you're much too pale, come along and have a beer. My wife, he said she left today, she took the kids and ran. But I don't care, I'm an Irishman and I'm doing the best I can. Well, I must have looked shocked when he jumped in my hand. I shriveled and shrunk and fell in the sand. I tried to hang on to a blade of grass, but the wind knocked me down and fell on my ass. Da-dun, 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 da-dun. The chorus went, where the whiskey and rum and the rye, the rocks and the beer was ever so clear. And the maidens are sweet and they'll give you a treat if you whisper nice things in their ear. Where we live for the love of the life we found, we love the life we live. Diddly 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 dance the Irish jig. I can't believe that just all came back to me.
That is the Steve Poltz brain right there. You're like, I don't know anything if I can remember this, and then you remember the entire song, the rhythm and the melody. Your
Yeah,
brain is
exactly.
I.
And it ended with the Irish blessing. So my Catholic roots were always in me. So I've always had this weird relationship with God, or my idea of God. And when I got sober, I went to rehab, right? And they graduated everybody but me. Everybody got out after the 28 days, but me, they went like this. Not so fast, Abernathy. Which goes back to that joke that I always say to my dad about the guy who he's out at sea and it's like they're out at war and it's World War I or something, and he gets a telegram that young Abernathy's mom has died, and he has to tell him, this guy's lost his mom. He's an 18-year-old sailor. He doesn't know how he's going to tell him, so he thinks about it all night. Finally, he gets this idea and he goes, all sailors report to the deck at 0600 hours. The sailors are all on deck, and he goes, all sailors whose mothers are still alive take one step forward. Not so fast, Abernathy. So, me and my dad always tell that joke. It's like my favorite joke. And that was what they did to me in rehab. They said, not so fast, Abernathy. And I had to do another 28-day program because I just was a little rambunctious. So by then, they would make you have a higher power. And they'd say, is that higher power God? And I had a problem with God because it was always rammed down my throat. I've always had this weird relationship with what is God, and that's why I love philosophy so much, and I love reading about world religions. I love Gandhi, I love Buddha, I love reading about all these different stories. And so when I got sober, I made Neil Young my higher power rather than God, because I said Neil Young was a power greater than myself, and they were cool with that in rehab. And I remember there was this old guy that was the rehab counselor, and he was a salty old bastard, and he looked like Hemingway. And I said, I'm having a real problem with this, that I'm never going to be able to drink again. He goes, oh, you can drink again. And this, I've never forgotten. This is what I learned in rehab. Anybody who out there is listening, you may be able to take something away from this, because it's affected me to this day. I said, what do you mean I can drink again? He goes, you just can't drink today. You can always say, I can drink tomorrow. So yeah, you can drink tomorrow. You just can't drink today. And it made it easier for me for some reason to go, Because never, like going back to what you said, I don't like rules. So I was like, oh, I can drink tomorrow. It just so happens that I haven't drank in 14 years, but I can drink tomorrow. See, I just feel like if I drank, if I was to have one beer with you, say I decided, you know what, I'm coming to San Francisco, which by the way, one of my favorite cities, where you live. I love California. I love everywhere. But I really love San Francisco. I love Northern California. I have so many good friends there. If I was to go have a pint of Guinness with you at Tornado, is that bar still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, great bar. I used to drink there. I know what would happen. I would have another one, and then I'd say, "Can we get a shot of Jameson somewhere?" Because I always like Jameson on the rocks with Guinness. And then I would have that, and then find somebody who looks like they're doing blow, and I would find them, and I would say, "Hey, you got a bump?" Because it just went so well together to do a line of Coke with that. But if you were to show me a line of Coke and we were at El Sol together, is that what it's called, El Sol?
Oh, Soul Food, the dinner place we go to in Marin. Yeah.
Then we went to Soul Food and I hadn't drank and you pulled out a line of Coke and did snorted one at the table, I would want nothing to do with it. There's something about the combination of alcohol leads me to want to do a line of Coke. They just go hand in hand like certain people that want to smoke, you know? If I drink, I want to do Coke. And if I do Coke, I will die. Because I OD'd on Coke. Like I was on a stretcher and it was going to stop my heart and they had to shoot me through a Valium and Demerol to slow my heart down, and I I just can't do it. So that's why I don't. And
I
but the
didn't know.
God thing, I still love talking about the God thing with anybody that will discuss it with me. My favorite thing is to discuss God when I'm at Waffle House late at night. You know, Dan Byrne has a song about red states have Waffle House, blue states don't. It's so true. Like if you're in a red state, and I live in Tennessee, there's a Waffle House near you, and I love going to Waffle House alone at 2 in the morning and sitting at the counter and talking to the waitress or the server, whoever the server is. Usually, I like it if it's a woman because I just get in a good conversation, especially an older woman with a gold tooth. Then it's like, if that's like jackpot to me, and I will sit there and watch the chef make the food at Waffle House and sit there. But you got to bring in your own real maple syrup and real butter because they use margarine and shitty maple syrup.
I
Ooh, a great.
didn't. I obviously didn't know you when you were in your cocaine days, and I've asked many friends who've known you for much longer than I've known you, and I'm like, "What was Steve like? What was the shows like then?" And they were like, "It's pretty much the same. He just, you know, you probably play longer." And I don't know, like they're like, It's not that much different. You just don't like kick people's drinks over and jump on tables and take their shots from them as like you used to."
Well, I used to get a lot of anonymous letters from people saying they were really worried. We're worried about you. We're so worried. And I was like, yeah, yeah, whatever. You gotta want to stop drinking on your own, you know? Nobody's gonna make you. Everybody has their own choice to do whatever they want to do in life, you know? If you think of like political parties and you think of people like, remember John Anderson? He was like an independent guy. There was always like these independent parties because we've always been a two-party system for the most part in the United States. You know, I remember I went to dinner with Joe Biden when I was in college. I was on the speakers committee. Went to dinner with John Anderson. But I remember Joe Biden came to our school in 1983, I think, to University of San Diego, and I was on the speakers committee. And so I got to have dinner with him. And he was a senator from Delaware. And that was amazing. I remember after having dinner with Joe Biden going, he reminded me of Charles Grodin, the actor that used to be in those movies with like a Goldie Hawn. He had this charisma. And then when you meet somebody that's in politics, like, and that was Joe Biden at his younger, in the 80s. And, but it was kind of cool having dinner with him. I remember going, that guy could be president one day. I love him. Like if you have dinner with a politician or you watch a politician up close, you can see whether you like them or not. I remember I saw Bill Clinton speak recently when I did Mountain Stage. You know the NPR show Mountain Stage? It's in Charleston, West Virginia, and it's there at the Capitol. And I went walking around before my show, and I went to the rotunda, the Capitol building, and there was cops all outside. And I wanted to see what was going on. And the cops, I just walked up to where the cops were. I go, "What's going on?" They go, "Are you here to see Bill Clinton?" And I go, "Yeah." And they led me in, and Bill Clinton was campaigning for Hillary at the time. And I watched him, and I was like, fuck. I watched Bill Clinton speak, and I swear to God, I felt like he was looking at me. Like, looking right at me. It was so powerful, and you could tell he'd worked the big stages. Whether you like him or not, politics aside, if you can separate any of that, you're like, I would do anything for this person. Anything.
Some
Like,
people have that presence, you know.
yeah, it's a certain. They've played the big stages. Like when I met Dave Matthews once, and I was never even into Dave Matthews. I mean, I don't not like him. I think he's really talented, but I didn't know his music. And my buddy, after I was on the road with Jewel, the band I was in, Tony Hall was the bass player, and he ended up playing on the Dave Matthews solo record that had that great song Gravedigger. And so Dave Matthews came to San Diego. I've never forgotten this. And Tony Hall calls me up. And he would always call me Poltz. Poltz, I'm on tour with Dave Matthews. Come on down, Poltz. And so I came down, and he had already told Dave Matthews about me. And Dave Matthews was like, had the same thing Bill Clinton had, where he looked at me. He was like, I've heard so much about your music. And just like, I was like, can I hug you? Like, when, certain things, certain people have this je ne sais quoi. They have this thing about them where they're very present, and you are the only person in the room. And Elvis Presley had that. It's this quality.
Oh, that's that's a true thing. That's great, man. I like that. I preparing for this conversation, I've got this like timeline of notes and stuff, and we're like about an hour in already, and I still have a little. We haven't got to our fan questions yet, and I'm always worried. I'm like, I wonder if I'm going to ask someone a question, and they're just going to go, "Sure, oh yeah, it was. It was. How was Benny Elvis? Oh, it happened. It was great." But no, not with you. I like how we just go down the wormhole and we get so much more. So I'm gonna skip a lot of these kind of timeline
You
questions.
can
But
rapid fire if you want.
what's that?
If you want, you can rapid fire your questions. I'll do yes like a
Well,
shitty.
I thought I would just touch on a couple little things, just in case there are people listening that don't know your full story. They know a lot about you now, though, for sure. But just my last little piece with the San Diego days, and I know this was before sobriety, but post Rugburns, I think a very important place for you in San Diego was Java Joe's,
Oh yeah. Oh my
and
gosh.
that's kind of where it all is. That kind of the epicenter where we get the Steve Poltz we have today. That's where you met Jewel, right?
Yeah. Java Joe is like gonna go down as a patron saint of music one day. He was a lot like you in a way, a tireless promoter of music. Not as garrulous as you, and not as pleasing as you. Like you're more fun. Java Joe's fun. Don't get me wrong, but he also had a grumpy side to him, and
I
you're
got to
more.
meet him. You brought him to High Sierra that one year, and I actually got to meet him.
Yeah, he's a beautiful soul. I mean, I have nothing but good things to say about Java Joe. He created a scene where there wasn't a scene. And Java Joe had his own style of charisma and his own thing where he just gave us a place. And so, yeah, me going into Java Joe's one night and thinking, do I want to drive to Poway? Because this was before it was in San Diego, it was in Poway. And I was like, do I want to drive to Poway? And I'm in my pajamas and play poker with these guys because there was always a late night poker game. And I go, yeah, I'll do it. We'd bring in beers. So I went in there, and that was when Jewel was working, and that was when I met her. And that was like that was like a lightning bolt moment. We all have memory markers of things that happen. And to this day, I can remember her working and making me some tea and, knowing who I was because of the rug burns and asking me about songs and us having this great conversation and talking all night, and then me playing poker with these guys. And then I went, man, Java Joe's got this scene. And I had all these other songs that were more folky, and I had the Rugburn songs that were kind of wild and pushing things to the limits. But then I couldn't do these other songs, these pretty love songs that I had, because I loved punk rock. You know, like I obviously had been in choir and in drama in high school and church choir, so I didn't have indie rock cred. I wasn't up with people, you know what I mean? But then when I went to San Diego and my sister left me all her records, that's when I got into college radio music and I discovered reggae. You know, Bob Marley. I was like, this sounds interesting. Before Bob Marley was ubiquitous, and punk rock and the Ramones and television. I eventually discovered television and all these, you know, Tom Verlaine and all these different bands, and it really affected me. And then but I was also writing these other songs because I loved Jackson Browne and James Taylor, and I thought that was how songs had to be. I had to write a song and be like James Taylor. I learned every song James Taylor ever wrote, and then I realized that everybody has their own fingerprint and their own songwriting style. And one of the hardest things to do is to find your own voice as a writer. And if you can find your voice, maybe there's an audience for you, because you've just got to look, when you find your own voice, meaning your own persona, who you are. And that's the great thing about getting older, being 60 right now, where you really don't give a shit what people think. Because when I was younger, I really cared. I really wanted to be liked, and I wanted to be accepted. And we still do, but you reach a point where you're like, this is who I am, and it's going to resonate, and people are going to, and everybody has vibrations. I truly believe this. So you have a vibration, a Casey Turner vibration. You do. And you emit this energy, and people are drawn to it that are meant to be drawn to it. And you're curating all these shows. And Tom Waits has a record he named Rain Dogs. And Rain Dogs, what it means is they're all the dogs that were lost, because after it rains, all the piss got washed off of the fire hydrants, and that's how they'd find their way home. And so there were all these rain dogs. And in a way, you are the guy that's providing this home to these rain dogs, these guys and girls that are musicians, and you're providing venues for them, house concerts, and you're finding people that want to donate their house to do a show. What a leap of faith. And people are coming into these people's houses, and you've created this scene, and people get a taste of it. It's like the first taste of cocaine or something. They want more.
Well, I mean, that's what I used to do. Now I have a live conversation series and I sell T-shirts.
But you will do it again. We have to visualize this and manifest it.
Can you give us a song, Poltz?
Yeah. This is fun though, isn't it?
This is so much fun. This is the
Yeah.
greatest interview I've ever done.
Isn't it good? This is the greatest interview. Look out of any window, any morning, any evening, any day. Maybe the sun is shining, birds are winging, or the rain is falling from a heavy sky. What do you want me to do for you, to see you through? Well, this is all a dream we dreamed one afternoon long ago. Walk out of any doorway, feel you way like the day before. Maybe you'll find direction around some corner where it's been waiting to meet you. What do you want me to do to watch for you while you're sleeping? Well, please don't be surprised when you find going home. What do you want me to do for you, to see you through? It's all a dream we dreamed one afternoon long ago. Walk into splintered sunlight, inch your way through dead dreams to another land. Maybe you're tired and broken, words are twisted with words have spoken and thoughts unclear. What do you want me to do for you, to see you through? A box of rain will ease the pain and love will see you through. Just a box of rain, wind and water. Believe it if you need it. If you don't, just pass it on. Sun and shower, wind and rain, in and out window like a moth before a flame. And it's just a box of rain. I don't know who put it there. Believe it if you need it. If you don't, just pass it on. And it's just a box of rain, or a ribbon for your hair. Such a long, long time to be gone, and a short time to be there.
Steve Poltz. If you're just joining us, welcome to Casey Turner Presents Talk to Me. That's Steve Poltz from Nashville, Tennessee. Oh man, I love you so much. Also,
Oh, be
uh,
quiet. I
oh,
can't help it. It's like that song is like scripture to me, and the words were written by the late great Robert Hunter, and the music was by Phil Lesh, and the Grateful Dead recorded it, and it's like I think like there's certain songs for me that have an alchemy, and it unleashes some weird energy from my spine, almost. It's powerful, man. And those old songs that the Dead did, they're like folk songs. When you really listen to that, he wrote it for Phil Lesh's dad as Phil Lesh's dad was dying, and it always brings me back to being with my mom as my mom died, and to be there with her is it's quite a weird thing to be with somebody when they die, especially the person that brought you into the world. And I had promised her that she wouldn't feel any pain, and so we were administering the morphine to her, grinding up the morphine pills and mixing it with water and putting it in her mouth, and having her drink it down while she was very much not really with us, but kind of opening her eyes a little bit. And I remember, about 2 hours before she died, I was like, who left me alone with all the morphine? Like, whose idea was this? Because like, I was looking at my mom and I was like, this looks like a great idea. Kind of like the thoughts I get in my head, like, maybe I should go buy a gun. Like, I have thoughts in my head about things that if I don't say them, they can come out in weirder ways. So I was like, this seems like a good idea. I should start doing some of this morphine. This would be good for me. I'm sad my mom's dying. And then, I remember the TV was on, and Adam Sandler was on. It was Christmas time, and he was singing the Hanukkah song. And I remember I was laughing so hard and crying, and that ugly crying where snots are coming out of your nose, and I was hanging onto my mom's leg, and watched her go wherever we end up. And who knows? Nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going on, Casey.
well, I mean, maybe you have a little bit of an insight. Some folks may not know this story, but back in 2014, while performing in Delaware or in Wilmington, Delaware, right? You had a
Yeah.
stroke. You had a stroke on stage. Now, there are people who have strokes and they're devastating moments. I can't can't imagine, but like you did it in front of an audience. Do you want to talk about maybe just how, just briefly, kind of like how that changed your life and the perception of maybe life? Do you view life differently since that evening?
Yeah, like you know how we were talking earlier, how you have these moments in life. Like one of them was when I met Jewel, and then we wrote the hit song "You Were Meant for Me," and how that took us around the world.
Let me. I just want to interrupt really quick. If the 14-year-old me knew I was interviewing the guy in the Jewel video, like, and making him cry and having him cry on my show, like, it wouldn't believe me because you were a very uh, everyone in my grade. I was in seventh or eighth grade when that song came out and the video came out. We were all like, "Who's this asshole that gets to hang out with Jewel with his shirt off?"
I know, right?
Sorry.
Oh my,
Anyways, that was my little footnote there.
dude, I had no idea. Number one, that that song was going to go so big. You know, you don't know, and that we were going to live at Neil Young's ranch in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and we were going to record this song, and that it was going to, and I was going to play with the Stray Gators. I mean, the stuff that was happening to me, and then I was going to get a major label deal and have dinner with Val Kilmer and Winona Judd and all these different people out there, and Jewel would end up taking me to Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, you know, Australia, New Zealand, Australia, where I still go to this day, and you know, and I'm still such good friends with Jewel, and still so awed by her talent and her kindness and who she is as a person. So that was a big memory marker, as was the stroke. The stroke was because, you know, I lost my vision on stage and was going to pass out, and then had some really good friends drive me to the emergency room at, I think it was Princeton, yeah, Princeton Medical Center. And if you ever want to get to the front of the line in the emergency room, tell them you've lost your vision and it was like a curtain coming down, because that means stroke. I didn't know that at the time, but they'll fast track you because if you're having a stroke, it's like time is of the essence. You know, they got to give you a shot in your belly, a blood thinner and stuff. So I was in that hospital for a few days, and you know, my vision came back, and then everything, like letters didn't make sense to me. I couldn't read, and I feel like it really affected me for a while. My already short attention span was shorter, but I remember when I walked out of the hospital, I started crying, and I was so happy to still be alive. Like it was a one of those experiences where you're really grateful, and that was what turned me into the Grateful Dead. I was never into the Dead, so I always like telling people it took a stroke to get me into the Dead, because I wasn't really into their music prior to that. But then after the stroke, I was like, "Whoa, this music makes sense to me, bro."
And you've got a pretty animated story of the recollection of all this that I first heard at High Sierra about it, less than a year later. You'd had the stroke, and I'm sure you can find it on YouTube or just go to see a Steve Poltz show, and you'll get even more insight in a more animated fashion. But
Well, I remember I had just written the story about the stroke when I first started playing again. I played the first place I debuted that story was at the 30A Songwriter Fest in Florida, but I read it and I really lost the audience going back, and I was like, what was I thinking? You know, a lot of times you have to die on stage, not die by a stroke, I mean, but die like something not work to really know how it's going to work. I've always said playing a show live is like high altitude training. Like those Kenyan runners that were always so good, like Abibi Bakila and stuff. And I don't think he was from Kenya, he was from Ethiopia. Abibi Bakila, remember him? He ran the marathon barefoot. And in the movie Marathon Man with Dustin Hoffman, my mind is a useless font of knowledge. So it was like Bibi Bakila was this great runner. He was like a national hero, and he died. But he was a great marathon runner. And I've always said if you train high altitude, like if you're playing songs on stage, that's high altitude practice. Because you know if something doesn't work, there's nothing worse than looking out at an audience and taking something too far and noticing, oh my God, I just lost the audience. They're not with me anymore. Or doing something that just became so boring that you bored them to death. And so these are all lessons we learn playing shows as musicians and entertainers.
So if you're losing the audience and you have a stroke on stage, that should keep their attention for a second. I'm sure no one in that room will ever forget that evening. Unfortunately,
When I said to the audience, I was like, "Can you guys see? I've lost my vision." And they were like, "Yeah, we can see." And I remember that this one guy goes, "Come on, man. You can't stop. It's my son's 21st birthday. Sign this record." And I couldn't even see where I was signing. And I remember they propped me up like Weekend at Bernie's, and I was like this. And yeah, it was intense. And I never want to have a stroke again, you know?
I remember when the word got out about that. Um, the music community, especially all of our mutual friends in the songwriting community, and it rippled because everyone's kind of looked to you as like someone, you know, you bring people smiles and you're our go-to for to forget about the worries in our mind and to think about you suffering or hurting or that happening. I think it's almost a different effect than if it happened to someone else. Like it's just I just remember I got so many calls and messages and texts because they knew I knew you. People who don't know you personally but know you or know of you. I get so many people asking how you were doing once the word got out about that, and man, people love you so much, and that was a scary time. And also, I remember that was the year, like at the Folk Alliance, we were in Folk Alliance in Kansas City, and that's when you wrote the song "Folk Singer." And one of my friends, to be happy, he played three songs at Folk Alliance in front of like 800 people and got three standing ovations. It was ridiculous. It was so awesome.
That was a breakout year for me as far as when I discovered you could do festivals and there was this whole other world of there was this whole other scene that I didn't know about when I was in the Rugburns. There was all these folk festivals and there was Kerrville Folk Festival, I remember, and you'd hear about these things and we were playing all these little dive bars like Davies Uptown Ramblers Club in Kansas City and wearing a dress on stage, and I wouldn't trade any of that for anything. I still love all those guys in the Rugburns, and it would be fun to do a short 2-week tour, and
And
rock
relapse.
out.
No. Well, I mean, there's a million more things to talk about, and we'll just have to save it for another time. But I do have some fan questions here I'd like to get through. We might have to kind of speed answer a little bit because we're really doing it right now on the time, and there's like a million people watching right now too. I think we broke the internet. It's amazing.
Oh, right on.
Okay, so the first question comes from Tammy Wintle, and she says, "If you were to wake up tomorrow and find out that this pandemic was only just a bad dream, would you be happy to pick up right where life had left off, or is there something you would change?"
That's a great question, Tammy. First of all, thanks for even taking the time to send the question in. I'm honored that you even did that. And you know, I think of life as a board game, like whatever, Monopoly or anything where you're just going around. So we're here now, and I don't want to ever go back. And I've learned, everybody's going to take what they can out of this. For me, what I've learned is I've been a workaholic, and I thought I had to play 200 shows a year and have no days off because the offers were coming in and I can't say no. But I've learned that, guess what? The world still goes on without me doing shows. Not that I was so solipsistic that I thought the world wouldn't go on without me doing shows. I just meant I thought I had to do that because I was on that track. And now it has forced me to slow down and I'm cooking and I find such joy in chopping an onion and chopping up garlic and celery and pouring in olive oil and smelling that aroma as it cooks in a frying pan, making some beautiful red tomato sauce with that, and with some really good pasta. And I've noticed that then having that smell on my fingers after chopping things and making a bread at night and waiting for it all night. It has to sit, 14 hours and then putting it in the oven and eating my own bread. The simple things of going for a walk, of learning a song that I hadn't learned. So no, I'm going to take from this and grow and reading books and learning new songs on guitar. And I wouldn't go back. No, everything's a gift from whatever God is to me. Whatever my idea of God is that I've made peace with, you know, all my friends are atheists, so that's why my favorite thing is to go late night and go, what if this shit's real? Don't you want some insurance? So my idea of God is like this power out there. I don't know. It's not a guy with a long white beard. It's this energy source that I see in people, and when I feel it, and I feel these moments of like, so, there's something bigger out there, something beautiful. So yeah, I this is what it is. That's a great question.
Adrian C asks if Smokey Joe, which is the name of your guitar for those of you that don't know, if Smokey Joe could tell us one secret about you, what would he say?
Smokey Joe would tell you that I still drool a lot, and Smokey Joe is the recipient of the contiguous string of saliva that falls out of my mouth as I'm playing, and it always lands on Smokey's body somewhere.
Sean Smith asks, I love the song, or first he says, I love the song Windows of Halifax. If the doors of Halifax could talk, what would they say?
They would tell you that I went back to Halifax. I've been back so many times, and I went to the library because I was born in the infirmary to the Sisters of Charity, and then that ended up getting torn down because I was born in 1960, February 19th. So years later, they tore it down and it became a parking lot. And then the parking lot got torn down and it became a library. Now it's a library. And so there's a door that leads into the library. And I went inside that library, and when nobody was looking, I wrote on the wall on a Sharpie somewhere. I defaced the wall where nobody will ever know where it was because it's hidden. And I moved a table and chair back, a shelf. And I wrote Steve Poltz, Halifax Steve Poltz Memorial Library.
Don Bostic says he's never seen anyone embody pure joy the way Steve Poltz does when he's performing. Who has been your favorite act to perform with?
Well, I've never performed with him, but I love seeing Bruce Springsteen play live because of the joy and energy he brings into the show. And I love seeing Tom Waits. I've seen him twice, his show, and Ricky Lee Jones. So I'd say them, but I would say there's been some powerful moments where I've been on stage with Jewel in front of like 15,000 people or 60,000 people at Woodstock. I think there might have been 100,000 because it was us, the Chili Peppers, and Elvis Costello. It was the night the riots broke out at Woodstock 99. And singing and sharing a mic with her. I mean, if you go to YouTube, you'll see it. And singing these songs, there's something really powerful about it. That many people. It's just a sea of people, and you look out. The craziest feeling of energy, but I still get that feeling if I play to 50 people in someone's house, as long as they're pushed up close to me. I can hit highs that I've never hit, that I wouldn't even hit there. Because I'm always riffing and I'm always looking for something new. That's why for me, this has been so fun to talk with you today because it spurs me on to these stories and these moments and things that I forget that may have happened. And that lead me down this other path. And that's what I love about a show is never having a set list. And sometimes it'll start off slow, and sometimes it starts off because I'm in a wild mood. It starts off fast. Sometimes people go, "You seemed a little down tonight." I can only be honest on stage for who I am. So that's the beauty of performing. It's still this mystery, and I'm still looking for that high. But the more comfortable you get in your own skin, the better the shows are going to be because they're going to be honest.
Yeah, I've heard you say this multiple times. I don't know what I'm going to do tonight. I never know what's going to happen, and I think that's why a lot of diehard Poltz fans will go if you're in the Bay Area and you're playing Santa Cruz, Berkeley, and then Nevada or whatever. They'll go to all three shows because they know they're going to get three different experiences that are unlike any other show that they've seen of yours in the past, which is pretty special. And I wish there's a lot of musicians I know that are really good at kind of going at it with that kind of angle, but not everyone. And you're not scripted, that's for sure. And I really think everyone appreciates that. Beaver Nelson, he's got a question for you. Beaver Nelson asks, have you ever laughed harder and longer than the tours you did with Adam Carroll, Scrappy Judd Newcomb, and himself?
Just Hearing his name is giving me the giggles. I have never in my life laughed as hard or as long as I did being on the road. I used to be booked by this really cool girl from Austin, Texas named Raji. Love Raji. I owe so much to her. I have nothing but good things to say. She stood by me and booked me in any club that would have me anywhere, pass the hat gigs, anything. And she knew I wanted to work. And she put together this tour of Scrappy Judd Newcomb, who's this legendary Austin guitarist, great guy, very funny. He's been in the Resentments for years, Austin staple. And then Adam Carroll, who's like this John Prine-esque singer who just finds the most beautiful details. And then Beaver Nelson, who is so literate and he knows every Townes Van Zandt song. He can speak literature with you of so many different kinds and stuff that he's been into. He can talk to you about musicians from Ron Sexsmith to the Grateful Dead to anybody. I can really talk to you about music. And so I would get in the van with these guys. We called ourselves the Four Corners of the Round Table. That was the name of our band. And we would go out and we'd be on stage together, and it was in the round. And Scrappy Judd is the kind of guitarist I could play on anybody's song. He's that good. I've always envied those guys that really, they could sit in with anybody and they don't even have to know the song ever, and they don't even blow it. That's Scrappy. And so he knew Beaver Nelson's songs really good, and Beaver has these great songs. And by the end of the tour, we would all sing on them. And Beaver had this great song, "I Piss Where I Please," and that I loved. And Beaver has great songs. Beaver is one of those artists that got away. That he for whatever reason, he should have been huge. That's how good his songs were. And Adam Carroll is like a John Prine-esque, like I said. But I would get in the van, and Beaver and Scrappy would be up front, and they would have to separate me and Adam because I couldn't even look at him because we would start laughing, and they wouldn't even know why. And for the whole trip, I'm talking for 3 hours, I would be shaking and tears would be coming out of my eyes. I go, I can't look at him. Finally, we'd calm down and not laugh, and then he'd look at me again, and all he'd have to do is go, and then we would start up again, both of us. It's still to this day one of my fondest memories of touring. Every show, and I would have never met Lou and Rain had I not gone out on that tour. And Lou and Rain have, been such a big part of my life. And
What?
they were
I
the
got a
ones that,
question from Lou DeMarco here.
oh, cool, that's a good segue.
It doesn't have to do with this tour, but he asked, what producer has been the most fun to work with for you?
Man, these are all, man, you people have good questions. Lou, first of all, Lou is such a knowledgeable music lover, and he's got such an extensive collection. Um, I would say when we made Jewel's first record and we lived at Neil Young's ranch, the producer was um, in the Stray Gators, and his name was Ben Keith. And he was the pedal steel player in the Stray Gators, and he played pedal steel on Crazy, Patsy Cline. Played with all these different people, and working with him was one of the most beautiful joys of my life because we lived at Neil's ranch, and every day we would go in there. And Ben Keith was the most gentle soul I've ever met in my life. And it was so fun. And then I would have to say Billy Harvey because we would laugh so hard and we worked really well together. And he's such a genius, what he adds. And then Will Kimbrough has been great. Joel Plaskett, Jeff Berkeley. Oh my God, we made the record Folk Singer.
Burke.
I love making records with Jeff Berkeley. Stephen Souls, who I made One Left Shoe with, who was in the Alpha Band with T-Bone Burnett, and he played with Bob Dylan in the Rolling Thunder Review. I have not had a bad experience with a producer.
That's way to cover that answer safely. Quick answer to this one. Kristen Stansby asks, how many pairs of socks do you have?
37.
Okay. Um, let's see.
Hi,
Here's a good one.
Kristen.
Here's a good one here. Scott Holbrook asks, how are you feeling about potentially performing to a crowd of people wearing face masks? And a follow up question to that is, when will we see some Steve Poltz face masks in the merch store on your website?
Well, I sell bandanas. so people can make wear that as their face mask, or they could make one out of it. I don't think I'm going to be making them, but I'd be glad to play a show again live because I do miss it. And if people have to wear face masks, then God bless them, man. Let's all wear face masks and not shake hands. I mean, I miss that. What's weird is I was playing a show on March 10th. I did a tornado benefit here in Nashville at City Winery, and I kissed Langhorne Slim right on the lips when I introduced him on stage. And that was 2 days before the proverbial shit hit the fan with all this. And I mean, who knew where this was heading? We were laughing about it. I remember Grant Lee Phillips was backstage and said, "Don't touch me." I said, "Man, he's being so paranoid," but he was very ahead of the game by, by a week. Grant Lee knew what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, the last show that I put on before this went down, I was with Tim Flannery, who's obviously a very good friend of yours. And for those of you that know Flan, I mean, he's a very outgoing guy. And it was Jeff Berkeley's 50th birthday. It was Burke's birthday at Hot Monk, and it's the last show that I put on. So we're celebrating Jeff's birthday. There's so much whiskey and paraphernalia backstage, and we stayed at the venue like 3 hours after the show, and that's late for Novato. And then yeah, that was like the next day. Everyone's like shut everything down. So I look back, I'm like, oh my god, we were all hugging, and then Doug Pettibone was like, yeah, I just got back from Milan, and I was like, are you serious? But those guys are all okay. It's been enough times past, I think. But anyways, that was scary.
You know what? Going back to that question Lou DeMarco asked, too,
Yeah.
when I was in the Rugburns, we made this record with this producer named Buddy Blue, who was in the Beat Farmers. And that was amazing because that was the first real time we went into a studio. We always made them in the garage, and Rob Driscoll would produce them with me. Rob knew more than I did. He was more of the producer. And then when we made it with Buddy Blue, it was like Country Dick Montana came in and sang on it, and Skid Roper from Mojo Nixon's band played mandolin. And I remember thinking, this is it. We've hit the big time. So the excitement of that, too.
All right, we got time for one more question, and then would love for you to close us out with a song, if that's cool with you, buddy. Our good friend Jerry Hannon asks, what is it about music that drew you away from a huge career you could have had in the nipple business?
Well, first of all, Jerry Hannon, thank you for the question. Jerry, for those of you that don't know, is just a fantastic songwriter who wrote this song called Society that Eddie Vedder covered from the movie
Into the Wild.
Into the Wild, which was a great book by John Krakauer. If you ever get a chance to read that book, it'll make you cry. It's beautiful. And Jerry has written so many good songs, and I've had such fun with Jerry Hannon. He is seriously a treasure of Northern California, Marin County especially. And he's known, he's gone back so far with me. And I had a career as a plastic salesman. I sold pipe nipples, and that was what I did. I would go to avocado growers, and I would sell to contractors that were landscape contractors and sell them pipe nipples and pieces of pipe that were threaded. And that was my gig for like 7 years. I did that and was playing music at night. And what drew me away was I went to Europe, and I realized after busking on the streets for 6 months that I could always make a living if everything fell apart. I could play just on the streets for passing change. And I met Jerry when I was playing on Catalina Island, and I had to take a piss, and he said, "I'll play a song, will you go pee?" And I was like, "Damn, this guy's great." So he played, and that was how we became friends. What? You got really good people.
That's actually that's a really good tie-in because they've kind of rounded out because I just had a memory. So I've known Jerry for a long time as well, and in 2007, after the Into the Wild thing was coming out, he was over at my apartment and he was sitting on my couch strumming a guitar, and we're just talking and hanging out. And he goes, "Hey, Casey," "Casey," that's my Jerry Hannon impression. "Casey, have you ever heard of Steve Poltz?" And I was like, "No." That's the first time I heard your name spoken. I just now had that memory pop in my head. So that's
That is great. That was a good invitation too, man.
I just talked to him like yesterday because he did a live stream for us at the Hot Monk's Facebook page, and
Oh, we did? Did a lot of
Casey.
people tune into those?
Yeah, it was cool. We just started doing it, and we're
How many
it's called the In the Meantime series. So after it's still up there. So I think it's gotten like 3 or 4 thousand views. But at one given time, I think there was like 100 people watching for. It was kind of yeah, it was cool.
I mean, what's it all mean now, anyways? It's all the rules are redefined. It's been changed, right?
It has. Well, Steve, thank you again, man, for being here. I really do love you, and thank you guys all again for watching. He's gonna close us out with a song. Give it up one more time, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for Steve Poltz.
Love you too, Casey. And I knew a man who came down from Kentucky. And everyone would whisper, boy, he sure is lucky. Go to church every Sunday and have breakfast at Stucky's. He rub somebody the right way. And all I'm asking for you to do is live by this simple creed I give to you. Just take 5 minutes out of the day and rub somebody the right way. And I knew a woman who could act like a girl. She held the secret for peace in this world. She'd stand on her porch with a baton she'd twirl, singing rub somebody the right way. And all I'm asking for you to do is live by this simple creed I give to you. Just take 5 minutes out of your day and rub somebody the right way. I know there's times you're frustrated and low, and you like a shotgun to shoot down your foe. You swam with your sorrows, both of them drowned. So tighten your seatbelt, wipe off that frown. Time passes quick, you know how it goes. You can open your arms, or you can turn up your nose. You'll have much, much more fun if you make peace with your foes and rub somebody the right way. And all I'm asking for you to do is live by this simple creed I give to you. Just take 5 minutes out of the day and rub somebody the right way. Got to rub somebody the right way. God bless
Oh,
you, Turner. This has been a joy.
it has been such a joy. That is Steve Poltz. I'll post some links below. You can go to poltz.com, Poltz. Buy all of his merchandise. He's shipping it out currently, and sign his mailing list so you can see when he's going to come to your town next. And thanks for the tips towards the podcast live conversation thing, whatever this is. Really appreciate it because that's all we got right now. Steve, really do, man. Thank you so much for being part of this. It has been a really special 5 hours of talking.
Thanks, man. This was a blast. I'll see you again.
All right, we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone. Stay safe, and check back in next Monday. I got to mention this Monday, my next guest is Glenn Phillips of Toad the Wet Sprocket.
Oh,
So,
he's great.
and then next Thursday, I've got G Love and Special Sauce. So it's gonna be a fun week next week. So just tune on back, and we'll see you all soon. Take care, everybody.